Jaya Nitya Leela Pravishta Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Parivrajikacharya Shotashat Shri Srimad Abhaya Charanavinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jaya Nitya Leela Pravishta Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Parivrajikacharya Shotashat Shri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda Ki Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Prem Sheke Ho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Dvaita Gadadhar Shivasara Gaura Bhaktavrinda Ki Shri Shri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Vrindavan Dhama Ki Navadvip Dhama Ki Yamuna Mai Ki Ganga Mai Ki Bhakti Devi Ki Tulasi Devi Ki Samaveta Bhaktavrinda Ki Nitai Go Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to the assembled devotees, all glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada Ki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th Canto, Chapter 12, Verse 10. Go line by line. Attayagyatayanesham Kratu Biburidakshanai Dravya Kriya Devatanam Kama Kama Phala Pradam Attayagyatayanesham Kratu Biburidakshanai Dravya Kriya Devatanam Kama Kama Phala Pradam Attayagyatayanesham Kratu Biburidakshanai Dravya Kriya Devatanam Kama Kama Phala Pradam. Kratu Biburidakshanai Dravya Kriya Devatanam Kama Kama Phala Pradam. Attayagyatayanesham Kratu Biburidakshanai Dravya Kriya Devatanam Kama Kama Phala Pradam. Attayagyatayanesham Kratu Biburidakshanai Dravya Kriya Devatanam Kama Kama Phala Pradam. Attayagyatayanesham Kratu Biburidakshanai Dravya Kriya Devatanam Kama Kama Phala Pradam. Hataya Yataya Nesham Kratu Bipuri Dakshanai Dravya Kriya Devatanam Kama Kama Phala Pradam. Go line by word. Atta, thereafter. Agyata, he worshipped. Yagna Asham, the master of sacrifices. Kratubir, by sacrificial ceremonies. Buri, great. Dakshanai, by charities. Dravya Kriya Devatanam, of sacrifices including various paraphernalia, activities, and demigods. Kama, the objective. Kama phala, the result of activities. Pradam, who awards. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki. Translation. As long as he remained at home, Dhruva Maharaj performed many great ceremonial sacrifices in order to please the enjoyer of all sacrifices, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Prescribed ceremonial sacrifices are especially meant to please Lord Vishnu, who is the objective of all such sacrifices and who awards the resultant benedictions. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita 3.9 it is said, Yagnatat kamano nyatra lokayam kama padandya. One should act or work only in order to please the Supreme Lord, otherwise one becomes entangled in the resultant reactions. According to the 4 divisions of Varna and Ashram, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas are especially advised to perform great ceremonial sacrifices and to distribute their accumulated money very liberally. Dhruva Maharaj, as a king and ideal Kshatriya, performed many such sacrifices, giving very liberally in charity. Kshatriyas and Vaishyas are supposed to earn their money and accumulate great riches. Sometimes they do it by acting sinfully. Kshatriyas are meant to rule over a country. Dhruva Maharaj, for example, in the course of ruling, had to fight and kill many yakshas. Such action is sometimes necessary for Kshatriyas. A Kshatriya should not be a coward, and he should not be non-violent. To rule over a country, he has to act violently. Kshatriyas and Vaishyas are therefore especially advised to give in charity at least 50% of their accumulated wealth. In Bhagavad Gita, it is recommended that even though one enters the renounced order of life, he still cannot give up the performance of yajna, dana, and tapasya. They are never to be given up. Tapasya is meant for the renounced order of life. Those who are retired from worldly activities should perform tapasya, penances, and austerities. Those who are in the material world, the Kshatriyas and Vaishyas, must give in charity. Brahmacharis, in the beginning of their lives, should perform different kinds of yajnas. Dhruva Maharaj, as an ideal king, practically emptied his treasury by giving in charity. A king is not meant simply to realize taxes from the citizens and accumulate wealth to spend in sense gratification. World monarchy has failed ever since kings began to satisfy their personal senses with the taxes accumulated from citizens. Of course, whether the system is monarchy or democracy, the same corruption is still going on. At the present moment there are different parties in the democratic government, but everyone is busy trying to keep his post or trying to keep his political party in power. The politicians have very little time to think of the welfare of the citizens, who they oppress with heavy taxes in the form of income tax, sales tax, and many other taxes. People sometimes have 80 to 90% of their income taken away, and these taxes spent lavishly for the high salaries drawn by the officers and rulers. Formerly, the taxes accumulated from the citizens were spent for performing great sacrifices enjoined in Vedic literature. At the present moment, however, almost all forms of sacrifices are not at all possible. Therefore, it is recommended in the Shastras that people should perform Sankirtana Yagya. Any householder, regardless of his position, can perform this Sankirtan Yagya without expenditure. All the family members can sit down together and simply clap their hands and chant the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. Somehow or other, everyone can manage to perform such a yagya and distribute prasad to the people in general. That is based on this principle, chant the Hare Krishna the Krishna consciousness movement is based on this principle. Chant the Hare Krishna mantra at every moment as much as possible, both inside and outside of the temples, and as far as possible distribute prasadam. This process can be accelerated with the cooperation of the state administrators and those who are producing the country's wealth. Simply by a liberal distribution of prasadam and sankirtan, the world can become peaceful and prosperous. Generally, in all the material sacrifices recommended in the Vedic literature, there are offerings to the demigods. The demigod worship is especially meant for less intelligent men. As a result, the results of such sacrifices go to the Supreme Godhead Narayan. Lord Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita 5:29, Bhaktaram Yagna Tapasyam. He is actually the enjoyer of all sacrifices, therefore his name is Yagna Purusha. Although Dhruva Maharaj was a great devotee and had nothing to do with these sacrifices, he set an example to his people, and he performed many sacrifices and gave all his wealth in charity. For as long as he lived as a householder, he never spent a farthing for his sense gratification. In this verse, the word Kama Phala Pradam is very significant. The Lord awards everyone different kinds of karma as the individual living entities desire. He is the supersoul present within the heart of everyone, and he is so kind and liberal that he gives everyone full faculties to perform whatever act one wants. Then the result of the action is also enjoyed by the living entity. If anyone wants to enjoy or lord it over material nature, the Lord gives him full faculties, but he becomes entangled in the resultant reactions. Similarly, if anyone wants to engage himself fully in devotional service, the Lord gives him full faculties, and the devotee enjoys the results. The Lord is therefore known as Kama Phala Prada. Om Jnanantimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtabitam Yena Bhutale Soyam Rupa Kadamayam Dadadi Svapandantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutupara Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagarajatam Sahagana Raghunathavitam Samsajivam Sadvitam Sadvutam Parishana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishankanvitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Kuranji Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Suttadevi Pranami Hari Priye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Kurusvise Namaha Vanchakalpa Turubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Paevacha Patitanam Pavembhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. It's a deep privilege to be here with you all today. I draw so much from all of your association, and to be with you all and have the opportunity to share is a great privilege that I'm very thankful for. In this wonderfully in-depth purport, containing so many precious jewels of knowledge, Srila Prabhupada emphasizes Krishna as the fulfiller of desires. This means that Krishna, as the supreme controller, grants us the faculties and the opportunities to fulfill the desires that are present within our hearts. And importantly, this is not limited to spiritual desires, but also to material desires that we may have. And if we harbor material desires in our hearts, Krishna, in his kindness, will provide the means of the fulfillment of these desires. But it is also stated that the pursuit and fulfillment of these material desires will inevitably lead to further entanglement, karmic entanglement, resulting in reactions that will bind us more deeply to the material world. Prabhupada also explains that the living entity is dynamic in nature. It is inherently active and therefore subject to desires. And desires are an intrinsic part of the nature of the living entity. And therefore it is a misconception to think that we can be without desires. The idea of being without desires is proposed in certain philosophies which rightly recognize the connection between the material desires that we have and the material and karmic entanglement that takes place from the pursuit and fulfillment of those desires. And so that connection is recognized, and then the goal that they posit of spiritual life is to attain a state that is without desires, that is desireless, in order to break the cycle of birth and death. And this is a very natural and understandable conclusion to draw. But in Vaishnava philosophy, it's recognized that desires are intrinsic to the living entity, and therefore it is a misapprehension of the fundamental nature of the jiva to believe that we can attain a state that is truly without desires. Because the soul as part and parcel of Krishna is naturally full of desires. But those desires need to be directed towards love and service of Krishna. So the desires themselves are not the problem. It is just the nature of the desires that we have that are causing this entanglement. And therefore our goal should not be to rid ourselves of desires, but rather to purify them. The aim is to not become desireless, but rather to have our desires aligned with the will of Krishna, rather than thinking of our own needs, our own pleasures, our own gratification. We want our desires to be in alignment with and for the purpose of loving and serving Krishna. Prabhupada uses an analogy to illustrate this concept, which is the finger and its relationship with the body. And that when the finger is in a healthy state, it spontaneously and naturally serves the body of which it is part. It does not act independently, but rather in harmony with the rest of the body, contributing to its overall well-being. But when the finger becomes injured or diseased, it can no longer serve this function and contribute to the body properly. And similarly, as living entities, we are part and parcel of Krishna, and that our natural, healthy condition is to engage in the transcendental loving service of Krishna. But when we forget this and instead focus on serving our own senses, we are like an injured or diseased finger that can no longer serve the rest of the body and perform its function properly. The desire to simply serve one's own senses is in fact unnatural for the soul. It's unnatural for the soul and inevitably will lead to bondage and to suffering. So how then to purify our desires? Well, the process of sadhana bhakti, which we are all engaged in, is designed to gradually purify the desires in our heart. Of course, we hear in the Shikshastakam Cheto Darpanam Marjanam, the cleansing of the dust from the heart. We know that just as dust accumulates on a mirror and obscures the clarity of the mirror, the material desires that we have in our heart, they cover our heart and they obscure our true spiritual nature. But through bhakti, this dust is gradually cleansed and the heart becomes purified. And as the heart becomes purified, our natural, inherent and original desire of the soul to love and to serve Krishna is revealed and can manifest. And an important component of this process of purification is described in Bhagavad Gita 259, the principle of higher taste, param dristva nirvartate. Now the higher taste refers to the spiritual fulfillment and joy that we feel in our hearts from connecting with our true nature through devotional service. And when we begin to experience the sweetness of this higher taste, our lower material desires, they just gradually lose their grip on our consciousness. And this is because the heart is always seeking fulfillment. You know, we are pleasure seeking by nature, anandamaya. And so once the heart finds something that is truly fulfilling and truly satisfying, then it is no longer satisfied with the more hollow and temporary pleasures that we find in this material world. Therefore, rather than trying to forcibly suppress or reject the lower material desires that we have, it is recommended, based on this principle, that our approach should be to cultivate an attraction to spiritual life. And when this attraction grows, then our lower material desires will just very naturally dissipate and fall away, because ultimately they can't satisfy the heart in the way that Krishna's love can. And it is here also that the importance of association reveals itself. Speaking for myself, I don't think there's anything more important in my own journey of Krishna consciousness than the association that I've been so fortunate to have come across. I just feel so deeply inspired by the loving hearts and the sincere service attitude of the devotees I've been fortunate enough to meet, and I really recognize that without them I certainly wouldn't be here, and that all the opportunities that I'm given are purely the mercy of the devotees that I've come across. And so I am forever and eternally grateful for the association in my life. So we recognize that association has just an immense influence on our consciousness and our desires. We can see that if we associate with people who have materialistic desires, say to accumulate wealth, accumulate status, or who are just focused on sense gratification, we begin to notice those same desires taking root within our own hearts. We should never believe that we've reached a point where our desire, our spiritual life is stable enough that we are not susceptible to the influence of bad association, and that regardless of the point we are at in our spiritual lives, our desires are always corruptible to the influence of bad association. There's a depiction of the Bhakti Kripa, or the plant which represents our spiritual growth. And it starts at Shraddha, at faith, and it works its way up through the different stages of devotional service, right up to the flower, the beautiful lotus of Krishna Prem, and all its emanations. And there are different practices, recommended at each stage. But if you look closely, going up the whole stalk of the plant, written is the word Sadhu Sangha. Sadhu Sangha, the association of saintly persons, is critical and essential at every point in our spiritual lives. And at no point have we surpassed the stage where it is necessary or beneficial. And so the desires of those we spend time with subtly shape our own desires. And so if we seek the association of devotees who are sincerely engaged in pleasing Radha and Krishna, those same pure desires will begin to form in our own hearts. Krishna Das Kaviraj Goswami writes in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Krishna Bhakti Janma Mul Haya Sadhu Sangha Krishna Prem Janme Tenho Puna Mukhya Anga. The root cause of devotional service to Lord Krishna is association with advanced devotees. Even when one's dormant love for Krishna awakens, association with devotees is still most essential. So we understand that the association of saintly persons has the power to transform and to uplift our consciousness. Just as iron becomes red and hot when it comes into contact with the flame, it takes on the qualities of the flame, so too we take on the qualities of the people with whom we spend time with. And so when we are in the presence of devotees who are full of love for Krishna, we feel that same spark within our own hearts. But in the same way that when the iron is taken away from the flame, it loses that quality of heat. And so we must feel that to be true of ourselves also, that when we step back from our association with saintly persons, we will lose the great gift that comes from that association. So our desires, they're not fixed or static. They are very fluid and changeable. We notice throughout the day our desires change, and they change as a result of the influence that we allow into our lives. And so therefore, to make progress on this path of bhakti, we must be very, very intentional about seeking the right kind of association. Association that will purify our heart and inspire us to grow spiritually, to grow closer to Krishna. And so just to conclude those points, Srila Prabhupada's teachings remind us that desires are a natural part of the living entity, but that they need to be properly directed. And through the process of sadhana bhakti, the heart is cleansed and our desires are purified. And by associating with devotees and acquiring that higher taste and engaging in sincere devotional service, we can awaken our true and eternal desire to love and serve Krishna. I wanted to speak also on the quality of generosity that is elaborated on in this verse and purport. Now, as a king, Dhruva Maharaj was the exemplar of a ruler who embodied this quality of generosity. And it's explained in the purport that in this current age, we see many of the rulers or many of the people in positions of power are not focused on generously distributing their wealth, but their focus is on the accumulation of that wealth and hoarding that wealth for themselves. And unfortunately, if we reflect on the people in the positions of most power in this day and age, their focus is primarily on the accumulation of their own status, power and wealth, rather than their focus being on the distribution of their resources to the people who they have a duty to protect and support. And that is the true quality of the king, and that is the quality that Dhruva Maharaj exemplified in his generous distribution to charity. And this spirit of generosity is recommended by Srila Prabhupada not simply for the rulers, but for all of us to imbibe that same quality of generosity. And why is that so? It's because spiritual life, at its core is this transition from seeking to please one's own self, to receive from others, to meet one's own needs. And we're transitioning from that egoic mentality to this ever-widening circle of concern and compassion for all living entities. We're trying to think not simply of our own desires and needs, but of the desires and needs of all living entities. That is the point that we are moving towards and trying to cultivate. And this widening of our hearts essentially helps us to become that instrument of service, which of course is the goal of our spiritual life. But when all the wealth that we accumulate is spent simply on our own sense gratification, it becomes very difficult to break free from this, these selfish tendencies that bind us to material existence. And accumulating wealth merely for personal enjoyment traps us in this cycle of attachment, this illusion that we are the enjoyer, this illusion that material wealth can provide fulfillment to the heart. But when we use our resources to benefit others, particularly in ways that are aligned with spiritual principles, we begin to experience the joy of giving and the satisfaction of contributing to something that's higher than ourselves. And now, if possible, charity should be not simply limited to addressing material poverty. Now, this is a delicate balance, because in this world and in this age there is such a devastating and pervasive material conditions that are causing people so much suffering, causing living entities so much suffering, and that we should feel greatly empathetic and compassionate to this suffering, and also recognize, and as Prabhupada has said, there needs to be a baseline of physical and mental health in order for us to even contemplate any spiritual matter. We can notice this even within ourselves, that when we have a physical need that is unmet for a significant period, it completely consumes our consciousness and becomes an obstacle for us thinking about anything other than that one physiological need. Imagine if you have not slept for many days, if you have not eaten for many days, even if you need to, go to the bathroom, that need becomes so intense that it consumes our consciousness entirely, such that we can't, even begin to focus on anything spiritual. So, remembering this, we recognize that people need to be at a baseline of physical and mental well-being in order for them to contemplate and engage spiritually. And so for this reason, providing those basic needs and supporting them being met is laying the foundation for people's spiritual lives and is important in that sense. And yet, there is also this deeper. There is the material poverty, but there is also this spiritual poverty, this spiritual hunger, which is equally pervasive in this world and in this age. And this also must be addressed, because this is at the root, ultimately, of all the suffering that we experience. And so Prabhupada emphasizes that the most meaningful charity is that which not only relieves people's material poverty and deprivation, but also uplifts them and benefits them spiritually. And by doing so, we not only help their temporary material circumstance, but also we assist them in their eternal journey back to Godhead, back to Krishna. And perhaps the most powerful example of this intersection between that which will benefit someone materially and that which will benefit them spiritually is mentioned in this purport, and it's the distribution of prasadam, the sanctified foodstuff that's offered to Krishna. And Prabhupada frequently recommends the distribution of prasadam as a form of charity that addresses both the spiritual and the material hunger, because we all need food to sustain our bodies. And at the same time, this food is blessed, it has been offered to Krishna, and therefore it has this spiritual benefit by consuming it. And so by feeding others with food that has been offered to Krishna, we provide this physical sustenance while simultaneously nourishing the soul. And in this way, our charity becomes a holistic offering, one that serves both the body and the spirit. And so when we are thinking about ways in which to give to charity and to alleviate the suffering of others, let us seek to try to find charities that lie at that intersection, that achieve both goals of meeting people's material needs and alleviating their material suffering, and at the same time something which will benefit them spiritually and will assist them on their devotional path. It is mentioned in the purport that formerly the taxes accumulated from the citizens were spent for performing great sacrifices as enjoined in the Vedic literature. And at the present moment, however, almost all forms of sacrifice are not at all possible. Therefore it is recommended in the Shastras that people should perform Sankirtana Yajna. As I was reading and reflecting on this, I just thought how fortunate we are, how blessed we are to live in an age where the prescribed yajna, or sacred sacrifice, is so wonderfully simple and accessible and joyful. And unlike previous ages where these elaborate rituals and intricate sacrifices and severe austerities were required to attain spiritual advancement, in this age we are given this sublime practice of Sankirtana Yagya, this congregational chanting of the holy names. And so instead of needing these vast resources or complex arrangements, we are asked only to use our hands to clap, or our voices to sing, or our hearts to dance. Just dance in joy, glorifying these holy names of Krishna. And this, of course, is the special mercy, the extraordinary mercy of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who out of his boundless compassion made the highest form of worship so easily available to all, regardless of birth or qualification or circumstance. And this Sankirtana Yagya is often described as a fire, a spiritual fire that burns away material attachments and purifies the heart. And just as in a traditional fire sacrifice where offers of ghee are made to nourish the flames, in this divine yagya, every clap of hands, every song of devotion, every beat of the drum is offering ghee, offering that fuel to the fire of Sankirtan. Even if all we are able to offer is our presence and attentiveness to this yagya, that in itself is contributing. That in itself is serving the kirtan. But to the extent that we are able to offer our voice, offer our hands, offer any musical instrument or any of the preparatory setup that is involved in before the kirtan takes place, whatever we can do to serve this sacred fire, we are throwing ghee on this incredible spiritual fire that is spreading its warmth across the world and purifying hearts. Allowing this fire to grow and to erupt and to spread its warmth across the hearts of all those who are present. But this Harinam Sankirtan, this congregational chanting of the holy names, it's not an ordinary activity. It's a divine gift given to us by Mahaprabhu out of his extraordinary mercy. And through Sankirtan, Lord Chaitanya has provided us with both the most effective and also the most joyful means of connecting with Krishna in this difficult age of Kali Yuga. And by taking part in this yagya, we are not only purifying our own hearts, but we are also serving others, serving the world by spreading this fire of Krishna consciousness far and wide. And just as a fire burns away impurities and illuminates everything in its path, this fire of Sankirtan burns away the deep layers of material conditioning that cover the soul, revealing our true nature as eternal loving servants of Krishna. Srila Prabhupada always emphasized that the chanting of the holy names, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, is the most potent and the most accessible form of spiritual practice in this age. And Lord Chaitanya has prescribed this as our sacred duty to spread this spiritual fire across the world, igniting the hearts of all living entities with love of God. So we remember that this Sankirtan is not simply for our own benefit. It is not for our individual salvation. It is a global mission that we have been entrusted to spread and to take very sincerely. And that the spreading of these names, the chanting of the holy names of Krishna is this is the fulfillment of the prescription and the desire of Mahaprabhu and Srila Prabhupada. And this is how we can please them and reciprocate the mercy that has been given to us by the chanting of these holy names. And Prabhupada would say, to every town and village this must be spread. And so to whatever our capacity is, our duty in this life is to share love of God through the chanting of these holy names. It's a little bit of time still if anyone has any corrections or comments or questions. Prabhu? Mm-hmm. Yeah, well thank you, Prabhu. The question is how do we find a charity that is both materially important and necessary, but also spiritually beneficial? And this is an assessment we just need to make each time we decide to give charitably. And we need to just assess where our resources are going when they're spent in charity, and think about whether what I am giving my resources to is something that will not only alleviate this material suffering, but also uplift and benefit people spiritually. And yeah, this is just, I suppose, an assessment that we need to make within ourselves, and just reflect on whether our distribution of resources is serving both of these purposes. Because one without the other is not as holistic and not as beneficial. So, I mean, it would be a wonderful service to find such charities and to share them with devotees, so that we have a sense of what it would be, what that looks like in practice, and which charities are an embodiment of that intersection. Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Mm. Mm. Yeah, thank you, Prabhu. That's right. I think that's probably the most powerful example of that intersection, because prasadam, brings forth so much benefits, and so too does association. So if we're ever in a position to contribute to, the Food for Life program, or all these wonderful prasadam distribution programs that take place, that's a very noble way to contribute our resources towards. Mm. 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 Thank you, Prabhu. That's very beautiful. That a hospital without nurses or without doctors is very incomplete, and both are necessary for the well-being of the patients. It's beautiful, Prabhu. Thank you.